Welcome to Intro to Studio Media. My name is Chuck Lyons, and today we're going to go over a lesson called Chain of Command. And we're going to talk about who basically answers to who the bosses are, what job responsibilities are for all the different positions in the TV studio. We're basically just going to be talking about the positions that we use for the television production studio here at Green High School. There's a lot of different job descriptions and different positions that we won't be talking about today that actually take place into some bigger studios. But let's start off talking about the chain of command. We'll be working with our PowerPoint here, so hopefully this will give you some information that you'll be able to take notes on this particular section. The production team. We want to first talk about our production team for the studio production and also really with any type of a production and who makes up the production team. First of all, there are three phases to TV production. We have pre-production, we have production, and we have post-production. Pre means before, post means after. And then production is when we actually do it, when we actually have the cameras out, when we're actually doing some taping. Out of the three of these, as I have mentioned in some of the other classes, the absolute most important part is the pre-production. That means that's where you sit down, that's where you do your planning, you sit down with pencil and paper, write out everything, talk about what's going to happen, because you have to have a blueprint, you have to have a roadmap in order to do a good production. If you do good pre-production, it's going to make your production go so much smoother. The better your production goes, that means that you're not going to have to spend as much time in post-production, which usually is not a lot of fun. You can really wrap up a lot of hours in post-production. So we really want to pay attention, especially to sitting down, talking about it, getting out the pencil and paper, and planning our production. So pre-production is the most important part. If we talk about our production team really, you sit down to develop an idea for the video. What's our video going to be about? If we're working in the studio, what are we going to be doing in the studio? We want to plan the production from start to finish. How are we going to make this transition from the idea that we have into the video itself? A lot of times you have ideas up here, but how are you going to convey that message? You know, what are people going to see on the TV set? What are they going to hear? You have to plan out all those things. And the original idea for the show, it might come from really anybody. You have a group sitting around brainstorming, and maybe the idea is somebody in the community told you about something that they would like to see on TV. So it could be an idea from a citizen, it could be an idea from somebody as a part of your production crew. And so you want to brainstorm and come up with a real good idea that's going to make a big difference in the production. In our production team, we have lots of people involved. You cannot do it by yourself, or it's extremely hard to do a big production, and especially a studio production. You just can't do a studio production by yourself. Lots of people involved. You're going to have producers and directors and scene directors and technical directors and camera people and talent. So there's going to be just lots and lots and lots of people, involved in the production. I want to start down through basically referring to our studio productions right now. Want to talk about the top dog. And first of all, we want to start out by the person that's in charge of a production, and that's the executive producer. If you can remember the word executive, that's going to help you on the test. And the executive producer is responsible for all aspects of the production. They are the big boss of the production. Just think about a TV show, maybe NCIS. You would have an executive producer for the entire NCIS TV show. Now there might be 10 episodes, 15 episodes. Each of those episodes might even have a different director. But usually there's one person that's in charge of the production for NCIS, and that's going to be the executive producer. And he's the big boss, and everything stops right with him. And that we talk about the buck stops here. That means he can't blame anybody else. He just has to take full responsibility for the production. If it's great, he takes all the accolades. If there's a problem with it, and then he gets blamed for things, and I guarantee you he will pass it down the line, but he's the one that's responsible for everything about a production. We have underneath our executive producer, we have a producer/director. In a big production, you might have another producer, you might have a separate person as a director, but for a lot of the productions and things that we're doing, we generally combine them together. The producer-director is really responsible for a particular production. Maybe they have two NCIS shows that they're doing, but they are responsible for a particular production. They report to the executive producer. The executive producer is their boss, and all of the talent technicians are going to answer to the producer-director. And they are the ones that they're going to really run the show in the studio. They're going to be working with everybody, and they're going to produce the show, and they have to know every aspect about the show and what's going to happen. So the producer-director, really they're responsible for a particular show, and their big boss is the executive producer. And I want to talk briefly about it. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but in any production you have writers. They're the ones that basically write the scripts. Very, very, very important people. We're not going to be dealing with this that much right now, but writers, they either make a show or they, it will fail if you do not have good writers for a show. That's why a lot of times TV shows, after maybe 2 or 3 years, the show kind of goes downhill, and it's generally because the writers ran out of ideas. You have to have good writers in order to be successful. They prepare the script, they interpret the message, and they write down everything about what they want people to see and hear. And they determine, what the format of the show is going to be. Is it going to be a documentary? Is it going to be an instructional? Is it going to be reality TV? And what type of style, what type of quality. The writer just really has a lot to do with the show. We're going to jump down. I'm going to skip over a couple of different areas. For some of the bigger shows, you have art directors, and you have different people that work in trying to put the show together. But I want to just kind of cover the people that we're going to be working with here in the studio. We also have what's called these people fall under the line of above the line personnel and below the line personnel. If we mention above the line personnel, these are your non-technical people. Think of it as the people that really, they sit down, they work with pens, papers, computers. These are the ideas people. These are the people that organize, put everything together. They're not the people punching buttons and running cables and getting the camera set. These are the non-technical people. And they can be everything from your executive producer to your producer, director, writers, talent, art directors, musical directors, choreographers, production assistants, floor managers, people for makeup, for costumes. These are all above the line personnel. And once again, they are non-technical people, and they're the ones that basically create the show. And then we have the below the line people. And this is basically your technical crew. These people could include your technical director, your TD for your lighting tech, CG for computer graphics, teleprompter operator, audio tech, video tech, audio playback technician, cameramen, engineers, grips. Basically anybody that has anything to do with any piece of equipment, and they're doing something with their hands. They're pushing buttons or running cables or running cameras. These are your technical people, and they basically call them the below the line personnel. So you have above the line, if you want to think of that as the people that work with pencils and papers and talk through ideas and put the show together, and then the people that actually make it happen are going to be your below the line personnel, and that's going to be all of your technical crew. Let's go on to talking about some of the people that we're going to have here in the studio. We talked about the executive producer, then we talked about we have our producer/director right below them. Now we're going to get to the below the line personnel. First of all, we're going to have the technical director. The technical director is the person who is generally the one that controls the shots that we see. We're going to be working with 3 cameras. So the technical director would be sitting at the board, what we call the switcher. They'll be able to take a look on little monitors, and they can pick from cameras 1, camera 2, camera 3. They can pick out whatever shot that is to be used. Now, they might be advised by the producer director, who generally stands behind them. The producer director might like to actually call the shots, but the one that actually punches the buttons up so we can use camera 1 or use 2 or maybe go to camera 3 next, that's going to be the technical director. And they operate what's called the switcher, video switcher, and they just switch back and forth to different cameras, or they can switch to different inputs such as a computer, whatever it might be. All of the technical staff, they're going to be taking directions from the technical director. So in our case, the technical director will be the one that will be sitting at the switcher. They will have the intercom system on, and they'll be able to talk to our cameraman and our floor director in the studio. But the producer, the technical director, and that their direct boss is the producer director. Now let's talk about the studio. In the studio, we have cameramen. We have cameramen, camerawomen. They just usually refer to them as the cameramen. They are basically responsible for the operation of the camera and the tripod. Their job is to make sure that the camera and the controls are working properly and everything, is in order. If there is an issue, if there's a problem that they can't figure out, they need to report that to their boss, which is the technical director. They can say, I'm having trouble on camera 3. There's an issue over here. And we need to know that before production starts. So that's why you need to get to your cameras. You need to get the cameras booted up, turned on, all the things that you need to do with setting the white balance and setting the exposure. If you're having any issues, make sure you communicate that to the technical director, because before the show starts, they will be asking you. They'll say, camera 1, are you ready to go? And you got to say, I'm ready. Do you know how to pan the camera? Do you know where it locks down at? Are you familiar with that tripod? Do you know how to pedestal the camera if they ask you to do that? So you're responsible for the operation of the camera, all the camera controls, and also for the tripod. So you can pan, tilt, and also pedestal. So you need to be familiar with those things. You are also responsible to keep the shot in focus. Now, most of the cameras we're going to be using here are autofocus cameras, but in a regular studio with big studio cameras and that, you have to focus the camera. Your job is to keep it in focus. And also for desired composition. You should know what the technical director wants, whether they want a bust shot, close-up shot, medium shot, whatever it might be. You need to know the different types of shots, and you're responsible to give them the desired composition that they want. So you need to take that advice from the technical director. Now, you will give them that composition. However, the final call, we use the word call, which means decision. The final decision whether to use your shot or not, it rests strictly with the technical director. If you give them a lousy shot, the technical director should be able to see that and say, camera 1, that looks terrible. You need to zoom in, tilt down, whatever it might be. And the technical director does not have to call up your camera. They still have 2 other camera shots that they can work with. So actually the final decision on whether they're going to use the shot that you're giving them, that rests with the technical director. If you give them the shot that they want, and they don't have you change, and it's their responsibility, and that they're the ones that have a chance to actually see the image before it's actually recorded. That's our technical director. And let's go on, let's talk about our lighting technician. In our situation, it's very simple. We have a series of light switches that you need to turn on. I have those all marked basically with a star. The studio was not set up properly when it was built. The lights should never be on off-on switches. They should actually run back to a room. They should be on a fader control where each light is capable of being dimmed. When you can set this light at 50% power, this one is 75, turn this one on, off, whatever it might be. Unfortunately, we do not have that. So it's going to be very simple. We're just going to actually not have a lighting technician. We're just going to have the cameraman. When you come in, what you need to do is go over and turn the light switches on. They're all marked with a star. But the lighting tech is responsible for the light on the set. That means the area that's being filmed. If it's too dark, then they need to turn on more light. Now they report to the technical director. Technical director would say, hey, the back corner on the left side looks dark. Could you put another light there for us? So they are responsible for the lighting on the set. Now we'll talk about audio. We have our audio technician. The audio tech, they are responsible for all of the sound or the audio in the production. All of the sound, whether it could be music, whether it's voices, whether it's sound effects, whether it's coming from the computer, whatever it might be, it goes into our audio mixer, and the audio technician has control over the sound. What they are going to do is they are going to monitor the level or the gain. The consumer word for that you might think of as volume. I don't really like to use the word volume, but they monitor the level or the gain of each channel. We have a channel for each microphone. If we have 5 people seated up here, and that we will have 5 microphones, and they will have control over each of those mics. Their job is to make sure that it is recorded at the proper level. It's not too strong and distorted. It's not too weak, too soft. You'll get a very thin, weak sound. We want it just right. And they're going to have a chance to monitor that by viewing the VU meters. And we'll talk about that later when we cover the audio board. But they are responsible for the sound. If you can't hear somebody, well, that's the audio tech. That's a problem with them. And that they need to know what's going to happen and what needs to be heard, not seen. All they're dealing with is strictly the audio. They're also responsible for the operation of placement of the microphones on the set. Like I said, if we have 5 people up there, we bring 5 guests in, they need to go over, they need to get each person hooked up with the microphone, make sure it's at the proper location, make sure that each microphone's turned on. So any microphones that are used on the set, they are also responsible for that. Since they are technical, they're going to report to the technical director. We also have what's called the audio playback technician. Audio playback technician is responsible for playing back any type of audio. That could be a CD player with music. That could be an MP3 player. Maybe you have your phone with your MP3 player in it, and you're going to play a song off of that. You are responsible for having that song, that sound effect, whatever it might be. You need to have it queued up. That means it's going to play song 3, if that's what the producer wanted. You want to make sure that that song is correctly queued up. So when they ask for that music to be played on the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, on 0, when you press the play button, we're going to hear music. That is your job, just to make sure everything is the right song, the right sound effect, whatever it might be audio-wise. Have it queued up and ready to play at the precise moment. Now, you can't control the level of that. That's not your job. Your job is strictly to have the correct song up there. The audio tech will take care of the proper gain. So the audio playback technician is responsible for having the correct audio queued up. They might operate a CD player, MP3 player, a computer that you're playing music off of a hard drive. It could be even audio that you're pulling off of an old videotape, a VHS tape, maybe a cassette tape. Whatever the source is, you're responsible to know how to use that. Let's move on to our next one. Going to talk about the video playback technician. Video playback tech, like audio, they are responsible for the operation of different pieces of equipment. It could be what we call the VTR, videotape recorder, even though we're not using videotape too much anymore. They still talk about the videotape recorder. They shorten that down to, usually they say the word vidder, VTR, vidder. Play vidder 2. That basically means that they're going to be playing back video on videotape player number 2. A lot of times now, since things are being played back off the hard drive of a computer, in a situation they still might talk about that and call it vidder. Basically, it's going to be playing back video. The video could come from a DVD, could come from a computer, videotape recorder, whatever it might be. Your job, once again, is to make sure the correct video is queued up. That could be a feature story. Think about the 6 o'clock news. They might have 6, 7, 8 packages or little feature stories that's going to be running. They need to be able to take a look at the script that they have each of those stories in the correct order. Because when the news anchors call up a story and they go to videotape, you want to make sure you have the correct video playing. And I'm sure that sometimes you've seen on TV where they have the wrong video queued up. So it's really important to make sure that whatever the package is, the little feature story, that you have the correct video queued up and ready to play when the technical director gives you the cue for that. Look at a couple other positions. We have CG. CG basically stands for computer graphics, and we'll talk about our CG technician. And the CG tech is responsible for all the graphics that are going to be used in the production. They're also responsible for the correct spelling of names and words that are going to be used. Think about that a program has started and you have a news anchor sitting at the desk, and we're going to bring up a graphic down in the lower third, down in this area right here, and you have their name spelled wrong. Well, now that video and that graphic is embedded right into the video. We just can't miraculously go back and edit and take that out. So you have to make sure that everything is spelled correctly. You need to double and triple check that. Very, very important. Basically, graphics can be words, it could be pictures, it could be graphs, it could be photographs. So anything along that line is going to be handled by the graphics technician. And they will have a chance to sit down and even design these graphics. And that can take hours and days sometimes to put together a really nice graphic package to use for a program. A lot of work at the computer trying to get those designed. And one of the biggest things about any type of computer graphics is really keep it simple. You must be able to read the graphics, the words, very easily at a distance. You might be sitting at the computer and you're only maybe 20 inches away from the screen and you can read it. But think about if you're on the other side of the room and you're looking at the TV set, and can you really read the words that are up there? If you have a tough time reading them, it's wrong. You really keep it simple. If you look at most major productions, whether TV, movies, 99% of the time the graphics are usually white with like a black drop shadow outline. Very simple font. It's amazing. They give us thousands of fonts in the computer to work with, all these crazy things, and they're too difficult to read. You want to keep your fonts simple, and you want to make sure that everyone can read your graphics. If they have a tough time reading, it's not worth it. And they're a technical person, just like everybody else we've talked about so far. They're a technical, so they report to the technical director. That's who their boss is. Let's talk about the teleprompter operator. They are responsible for operating the teleprompter. This is basically the monitors that we have out in our studio that the talent can look right back at those monitors and they can read the words that are going to be scrolling. They are also responsible for loading the material into the computer so that they can scroll on the monitor. And in our case, we're using a program that is very, very easy to use. Basically, all we have to do is we have to make sure that people type out their copy in Word. If they save it in Word on a flash drive, or if they email us an attachment in Word. We're able to load that in the computer. We're able to put that into our teleprompter program. It will automatically adjust the font size, so it's going to be very easy for the talent to read at a distance. And then you're going to basically control the scrolling. One of the things you need to do is to keep the copy, that's the words that are being read, as they are scrolling, we want to keep them right about the center of the monitor. And that way you don't want the words going too fast, running off the screen, or they're coming out too slow, because the talent, sometimes they're starving for words. They want to tell the operator, come on faster, or slow it down. And that your job is to keep the words right in the middle. With the unit that we're using, you control that by the mouse. If you physically move the mouse forward, it speeds it up. If you pull it back a little bit, it slows it down. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you can do that. So just by moving the mouse forward and backward, it can scroll faster or go slower. But what you want to do is to listen to the talent. The talent, the people that you're going to see, the people up in front who are doing the talking, you follow the talent. The talent doesn't follow you. If the talent is reading slow, you go slow. If they start to pick up the pace, you need to pick up the pace. You'll be able to hear them back in the control room. You'll be sitting back there, but you need to go at the speed that they are reading, and want to keep them in the middle. Now, you might have some trouble at the beginning until you get the technique down and that, but you'll find by playing with the mouse, moving it forward and backward, and that you can get that down. But that's what the Teleprompter Operator does. And if there's any problems with the script, maybe the talent's looking at the script that they have, they notice that something doesn't make sense, or they like you to change the words, or maybe they don't know how to pronounce a name, and once they find out, maybe they want you to phonetically type that out. You need to be able to go in and make any changes in the copy in that. So you're going to be working with the producer director. They're going to be working with the talent, and if you need to make changes in the copy, and that you should do that. Remember, they're not going to be looking at the script. They're going to be looking back at the teleprompter. So the only thing they're going to see is the copy that you have put into the computer. So you need to know how to go back into Word and make any changes that are necessary. We're just about there, a couple more to do. We have our floor director. Our floor director is basically a person that is out on the floor of the studio, and they're cueing the talent. That's one of their big jobs that they do. They're basically letting the talent know when the program's beginning and when it's time to talk. They provide the technical director with any last minute changes going on, because they have a headset on and they can communicate with everybody on the studio floor. Remember, everybody else is back in the control room. So any last minute changes in script or whatever might happen, they can communicate very quickly with the technical director, because they also have a headset on. In small operations like we have, a lot of times we won't have camera number 2. You're not only are you going to run camera, you're going to be the floor director. And this is where you'll be on the floor listening to the technical director going studio countdown in 5, 4, 3, and pointing. And later we'll talk about it's a silent 2-1, because we have to have that perfectly quiet to give the audio technician enough time to bring up the microphones on the set. So you never say 2-1. You only show 2, 1, big hand comes down, points to the talent. That lets them know when they're ready to begin. Okay, the talent. Talent are the people that you either see on the TV set or you hear. And sometimes, like I said, we have maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe there would be 5 people sitting up here. They just talk about everybody as talent. That's a generic name given for the people that you will see. It might be somebody off camera talking, and they would also be considered talent. Now this is where it changes. Think about it. They're not doing anything as far as with anything technical. So they're not going to report to the technical director. They're going to be working with the producer director, because they're going to be working with this. What are we going to say? What are we going to say? Once again, goes back to putting the program together. So they're going to work with the producer director. A lot of times they're responsible for the script. Maybe they did all the script writing. Maybe they get some script, they need to do some rewrites, change some things around. And they're also responsible for correct pronunciation. Because if you do not know how to pronounce a word, people are going to hear you. And you don't want to get partway through a production, also you realize that you didn't look at your script and you go, hey, I don't know how to pronounce that. That's why you have to read your copy over and over ahead of time. If you do not know how to pronounce something, you need to ask your producer director. If they don't know, they need to ask somebody. And we want to find out correct pronunciation of the words because people are going to hear you say those names. If you need to have something phonetically written out, no problem. All you need to do is communicate that to the producer director. They will go back to the teleprompter operator and they can phonetically put that name in there to make it easier for you to read on the teleprompter. But you are responsible for correct pronunciation. And you need to look presentable on camera. It all depends on what the situation is. If you are outside at a game and it's 20 below zero, you really don't need to have a suit and tie on. You would want to be dressed appropriate. So you have to think about the situation, the type of production that you're going to be doing. But you want to look presentable as far as your hair, clothing, posture, so forth, depending on what the production is. You need to also be articulate and consistent in your voice level. We don't want you to be talking just real soft and then get real loud again and then back soft. You want to get at a level of speaking so the audio tech can monitor your voice and they can adjust accordingly instead of having to take our fader and go up and down as you raise your voices up and down. So you want to try to keep it one level going through. And we have our very last position. For at least what we're doing here. This is our floor manager. We talked about floor director, directing people. This is a manager. The floor manager is on the floor of the studio and they are managing set pieces. That would be any kind of props, desk, if we have any background sets, not a green screen, but background sets that need to be moved around, maybe couches, chairs, tables, telephones, lights, whatever it might be, any kind of props that are used, the floor manager takes care of that. And they move equipment around, they move cables around. A lot of times it's some very back-breaking work. They're also responsible for storing set pieces. A lot of times you have a storage area, so you could take this desk off, move it back to the storeroom, bring out the couch and chairs. So anything that's going to be moved around in the studio, that would be the job of the floor manager. And all of these people in that are necessary in order to have a good production. Very, very important. I can't think of one job that's really more important than another one. You've got your above the line personnel that they put the show together, what's going to happen, but you still need the below the line personnel to execute everything. Making sure everything's recorded properly, good audio levels, good camera work, a good lighting, teleprompter, whatever it might be. You need the talent to deliver that material properly. So every single job we have is, in the studio is very, very important. Your job is to know what your job is that day. If you're the cameraman, don't worry about audio playback. Don't worry about the microphones. That's not your job. Your job is to operate the camera, get everything set up properly, and if you do that to 100%, that's great. You did your job. Everybody else needs to do their job, and the main thing is to focus. And that means to concentrate. If the production is 30 minutes long, you need to think about nothing else, just that production for 30 minutes. Once you lose your concentration, that's when you're going to make a mistake. You have to think about it, you have to concentrate. That's going to make all the difference in the world. Anyway, this wraps up this section on chain of command, kind of talk about the different job positions. And remember, the top dog, the guy, the big boss, that's your executive producer. And then we have all the different people fall underneath the executive producer. But everybody's important. And we'll be back later for some more lessons, but this will take care of the lesson and the importance of the chain of command.